You could go down. You could be grinding. You could do different things. You could be in busy work today, but you chose to be here and invest in yourself. So for that, I'm honored and I'm humbled, and I really, really appreciate it. My daughter was born about 4 years ago, and after that time, I kind of made the decision I was going to get off the road for a while. And then 2020 happened, so I didn't really think we had a choice. So this is the first opportunity I've actually had to be in front of an audience in this setting in quite some time. And I knew I was a little rusty when I got off the plane. I flew out of Florida. It was 75. Don't be jealous. And I was wearing shorts and a t-shirt, or like a light fleece long sleeve, just because airplanes are a little cold at times. And when I saw everyone in Newark wearing parkas and beanies as I was heading to the door, I realized I was in trouble. It was also raining. So I stood there like an icicle with people just like walking by, like, who's this homeless guy? Or at least they didn't know how to be homeless here. And until the Uber showed up and I defrosted. So it really is a privilege to be here. You came in today deciding one or two things. For most people, it's I'm going to keep the information that I have. I know what I know. And what I find is the most coachable people that I've worked with are the ones that are most flexible and the ones that acknowledge, I don't know, they're open and they have a willingness to change. They look at reality and say, look, there is no reality, it's fluid, it's changing. The environment is changing, the economy is changing, the market is changing. And I'm gonna ask you today to really have an open mindset that regardless of what got you to where you are today, you're open to changing some concepts and looking at business a different way. Is that fair? So you get to decide, do you leave with the same experience you walked in with, or do you leave a different person with a different education or a different reality? So my name is Dru Lee. I've had the privilege of being in the real estate business since 2003. And in 2003, I was so excited. I got my real estate license, and it was in October, and I was cloud nine. I was ready to go. I was ready to take on the world, go build my fortune. And then in November, I made a really, really bad decision. I had a brand new Mazda 6, fastest car I'd ever owned, first new car I'd ever owned. And I decided it would be a great idea to imitate Fast and Furious. Any of those movies, just pick your favorite one. And in that unfortunate series of events, I ended up in the hospital. I took out 2 trees and the car was no longer movable. And ever since then, I'm kind of felt like, you know, there was a reason I walked away from that, or limped away from it, as you were. And if you're attempting to start a new business, the worst thing you can do is end up in the hospital. Because then I'm walking around with a cast, and I'm having to explain to people why my parents are driving me to and from buyer appointments, listing appointments. Needless to say, things weren't going exceptionally well. Clearly, I figured some things out along the way. So I've had the privilege of being in the real estate business since 2003. I began coaching in 2009. I'll tell you a little bit more about that. I have a degree in social psychology from Park University. That's interesting. And I'll tell you why. I've worked with some of the best, including Tony Robbins, Chloe Madonis. I've worked with Mike Kalowitz for Profit First. And I believe that our education, our experience, and what or how we invest in ourselves determines ultimately the trajectory that we have. But what's amazing to me is not all of these accolades, accomplishments, or the fact that I'm still here. I love this industry. It's absolutely found my home in this business. What fascinates me is when I was 10 years old, my father, I remember he collapsed at the dinner table. And he was kind of like a superhero to me, you know, like anybody's dad or parent. And he all of a sudden became mortal. And in that time, within 6 months, he was retired from the military based on health alone. And we went from what I considered middle class. I didn't really know, because when you're in the military, you always have housing and food, so you're pretty good. We went from middle class to less than that. And my mother went to work full time for the first time in my life when I was 10. By the time I was 11, my brother and I found ourselves in a situation where parents were always working, didn't have daycare, so we kind of raised ourselves. Any 10-year-old or 11-year-old that raises themselves, how do you think it's going to turn out? We make good decisions. How many of you have children? Your kids make good decisions? So on and so forth. Yeah. I was like that. So I wasn't doing necessarily the best job raising myself. When I was 15 years old, I made a decision that I disagreed with the teacher so much that I was asked not to return to school. Some people call it a high school dropout. Nobody actually drops out of high school, is what I learned. People are told not to come back, and if they do, there will be consequences involving usually a badge and handcuffs and those type of things. So my decision-making skills didn't necessarily get better. They actually got worse. And when you're a dropout from high school, you learn to hang around other people just like you, other dropouts. You can see my trajectory is getting really good, right? So I hung around a lot of people that were also going nowhere in life. One of them, unfortunately, this day is sitting in a penitentiary on death row. I say that not to impress or not to have any kind of emotion reaction. I say that because that's the trajectory of the people that I was around at the time. So my story is so different in so many ways from a 15-year-old dropout to somebody who ultimately graduates college. How does that happen? Change your social circle. I learned at a young age, some of the 5 people you hang out with most is exactly who you're going to end up being like. Not in a good way. Pitbull said, show me your friends, I'll show you your future. If you have kids, you know what I'm talking about. There are kids that you're afraid and you don't want your kids playing with, hanging out with, associating with. I was that kid you didn't want your children around because you could see real quickly I wasn't going anywhere in life. I made really bad decisions. At one point in time, these bad decisions finally caught up with me. I was hanging out with gang members. I was hanging out with people doing really, really bad things. And one night I realized there was a difference between being affiliated with a gang and actually being in one. I was not in one, and they made that abundantly clear. I had, I think I was in the hospital for 2 days under an unfortunate incident where people decided, all right, you're no longer our friend. That was a wake-up call. Some people actually need to have the crap beat out of them to wake up. I was that kid. So on a bad day at work, I picked up the phone one day, I called the Navy recruiter and I said, get me out of here. What can you do? Shortly thereafter, I was in the military. I served 6 years in the military active duty, really proud of that. I served 2 years in the reserves. And as I was getting out of real estate, the person who had sold me my first home said, you should get your real estate license. I said, no. After about 6 failed attempts, finally convinced me to get my real estate license. And then I went to work. And then I hit a tree. And then the series continued, started all over again. We're going to pick that story up in a few. Why is it important that you're here? I was at a seminar last week and they called this the Hunger Games of real estate. Why is it the Hunger Games of real estate? You can look at the market and you can blame what's happening in the market. The market's good, the market's bad. Let's be real. No judgment. Most of us don't pay attention to the market enough to really know if it's good or bad. How many of you know how much market share you have today? I'm going to ask you to start studying that number of what is your percentage of the market. How do you know? You look at the overall market, number of listings, number of sales, and you look at your number of listings and your number of sales and you do the math. That will tell you your market share. Because if you're still in this day, in this business, at this time next year, you will have survived and you will have increased market share just by the fact that you're still doing business. So I love that you're here and I'm honored. Last year, 2019 or 2021, we sold 6.49 million existing homes. Members, we have nearly 1.6 million real estate agents. 1.6 million real estate agents, and we sold 6.49 million homes. Multiply that by 2, that was the number of sides that were available in the real estate industry at that time. The good news is there was ample business. How many of us felt like I had an amazing year in 2021? We got on this trajectory where you got used to doing more business year after year after year after year. How many of you 5 years in a row, you increase your business consecutively for at least 5 years in a row? Most of you in the room. We got used to it, didn't we? Things were good. We were celebrating. If you got on social media, all you saw is record year, best year ever. My team and I did this. I helped so many families. Well, then what happened? 5.3 million existing homes sold last year. It was like the rug was pulled out. We know why, so I'm not going to get into the why, but essentially the national average of home sales is $366,000, $366,900. That's the average median price of a home in America today. It's $366,900 at the end of the year. If I multiply that by 2.5%, the average commission on one side is $9,173. I take the $9,173 and I multiply that by the difference of 2021 and 2022, I come up with 1.46 million homes that a year ago or in 2021 sold, in 2022 did not. What's that mean? You multiply that number together, you end up with $13.4 billion in real estate sales commission that remained in equity versus exchanged hands in the real estate industry. That's one side. What's the real number? This isn't including new construction. This isn't including foreclosures, bank-owned properties. This is simply pre-existing homes. That means $26.8 billion in 1 year stayed in equity and didn't change hands in the real estate industry or with the real estate agents themselves. Therefore, any industry in America, any industry in the world for that matter, if you walk in and you take $20 billion out of it, you think there's going to be a squeeze? This is a lot of what's creating the Hunger Games of real estate. The other reason is the last time we sold, the prediction this year was 4.3. The last time we sold 4.3 million homes was 2012. And in 2012, we had less than 1 million real estate agents. Check the math. We have still about 1.6. For the first time, I checked the numbers today, for the first time in 12 years, the number of real estate agents went down, month over month. This is a sign of things to come. Look to the person to your left, look to the person on your right, and make the decision, we're still going to be here. Some of you are not convinced. I don't know, I like in here. Did you see who I came with? When I joined the Navy, I studied Navy SEALs because they were the elite of the elite of the elite. And I told you, growing up, I didn't necessarily have the best role models. I had a role model of myself and the people I hung around. It wasn't bright. So I started studying Navy SEALs. What I learned about Navy SEAls is they go through a grueling process just to go on day one of being a Navy SEAL. Did you know that? When interviewed for the instructors of BUDS, based on the water demolition school, when they interview the trainer, they say, how do you know if a person's going to succeed or not? They said, we don't. We have a really good sign. And the sign is majority of the people who succeed and they make it all the way through where they're trying to become Navy SEAls are the people who help their buddy. It's the person that is not so worried about, hey, am I going to make it? It's the person that locks arms with the person next to them and said, we're going to make this together. And that's what I really want for each and every one of you is look at the person left and right and say, look, let's make the commitment. We're still going to be here a year from now. In 2012, we sold the least amount of real estate we have in the last 30 years. Interesting number, we sold the most per agent productivity in that same year. Because there wasn't as much competition for it. The shifting market is one thing. I wouldn't spend a whole lot of time trying to figure out what it is or where it is or where it's going, because about the time you do, it's going to change. It looked like we were moving into a buyer's market slowly. It was going to take a while. That lasted for all of like 1 month. And then all of a sudden, inventory and multiple offers. What it really shows is we have no idea what the true demand is. Supply and demand drives pricing. Affordability is associated with interest rates. And your level of competition and the skill set, that's about each and every one of you in this room and the heart that you brought into it today. Let's do some data bank math. I want you to think about your own database. These are real numbers from a real coaching client that I work with. And I'm going to ask you to do the same thing. Write this formula down. Feel free, grab your phone, take a picture of it. This is a real exercise to show you how much money, potential money, is actually in your database, living, breathing right now. Look at the total number of contacts in your database. Using the example 4,576. Great goal to have. If you're sitting at a database of less than 5,000 people, get it to 5,000. This is a combination of people you know, people you don't, people you've done business with in the past. I'm going to ask that we stop calling them past clients, although I know that's how we've called them since the beginning of real estate. But have you ever noticed the only professions that address a person as a past client are the real estate agent and the funeral home director? Everyone else just calls them clients. Attorneys call them clients. Accountants call them clients. Real estate agents, not so much. We're going to change that because we have to change the way we do business and start thinking of this as the long, infinite game, not a game with multiple cross loans or multiple finish lines along the way. So what is the home ownership rate in your county? Grab your phone, feel free. Google this. This is how fast it takes. Put in your county, put in your city, put in your zip code, and what is the home ownership rate in blank? It will give you a percentage. Last week I was in Palm Springs, California. It said the percentage of home ownership was roughly 62%. The population was 49,000. Did the math. It tells me how many homeowners are in that area. I am a product of where I am today, frankly, because of relationships, both good and bad. And one of my relationships is with an amazing gentleman named Ben Kenny. He's a business partner. And Ben has a very, very simple philosophy. He believes everyone lives somewhere. Right? Really complicated. You live in a house, an apartment, a condo with your parents, on a park bench. You're living somewhere. So you take the home ownership rate in your database, 4,576, and you multiply it by the percentage of homeowners in your area. That will tell you approximately how many people in my database own a home. You may or may not have their address, but it gives you an idea of how many homeowners are living in my database today. And in that process, National Association of Realtors says 10% of people or 10% of the population will move. The way to test this math, look at your area, your zip code, your county, your city, and multiply it or do the math on what are the total number of sales that happened last year. Last year was a little bit of an anomaly. If you look at the last 2 years combined, you'll probably find that in your area, on average, about 10% of the people will move in. They will buy, they will sell, they will change, they will transfer. So if you look at the number of sales in your database that live in 1 year, 2,837 multiplied by that 10% tells me there are 284 opportunities living in that database alone. Are you capturing as much business as you could? You take the 284 opportunities, multiply that by your average commission. I will tell you 1/2 of what your database is actually worth in any given year. If you were going to sell your book of business, this gives you an idea of what it's actually worth. And in that would give me 284 listing sales. And if I generate one buyer sale, now all of a sudden I have 568 sites, which we'll see exceeds 10%, which we'll talk about later, the 10% rule of thumb on a database. How many of you believe you lose more business today from overcalling or undercalling? What say you? How many of you say you lose more business because you called too much? Look around, please. In all the years that I've asked that question, not one person has ever said, I call them too much. I got like 9 restraining orders against me. You know, people are, I got lawsuits for the do not call. I mean, I am on top of people. But our biggest concern in the relationship is that we follow up too much. We call people too many times. That's the amount of volume that's just living in your database alone. And yesterday, when I shared this, and I was looking at the slide, it said transactions. We've got to stop our language and change our vernacular. It now says opportunities. Why? Because we had Will Guidaro, author, which if you've not read his book, Unreasonable Hospitality, please write that down, get it on Amazon. It's great on Audible. He has an amazing voice. Someone compared it to like slicing butter. I don't exactly know what that means. It's very soothing, apparently. But in Unreasonable Hospitality, he was our guest recently at an event. And we had him on stage doing a live interview. And one of our co-hosts used the word transactions. And he said, what do you call it? Now, this is the person that believes in hospitality so much, he built the #1 restaurant in the world back in 2017. His name is the #1 restaurant in the world. And this is his story is how he did it. And when he said that we call it transactions of the real estate industry, I thought he was going to vomit on stage. He had a physical reaction of this is how we think about people and arguably the most valuable asset that anyone will ever own. And we help them move. We help them with major transitions in their life. And we call it a transaction. We've got to stop thinking traditionally and rethink the industry, the hospitality that we offer, the customer service. So we're going to call them opportunities. So if I took those and I had a buyer sale from each side, or I worked both sides of the transaction / opportunity, it's going to take me a while after 20 years. That gives me 568 opportunities to help families in 1 year. How many of you feel the need just like stop what we're doing and just go call everyone in your database starting today? Building a business, especially with multiple changes. I saw how many hands went up that have been in the business over 5 years, which means you went through an unprecedented time where all of a sudden we didn't know if we were going to be able to do business anymore. You made it through 2020, which was the most unprecedented time in history because we didn't know if we were going to be able to work anymore, right? How many of you were scared shitless? Okay, a couple of you are on this. I had no idea what was going to happen, but here's what I noticed. When I would put out questions and I'd look at my database and I'd ask and I'd look at online sites and I'd go to social media, there was not a single MLS that anyone ever reported back to me during that area. And I spoke to some of the agents that were in Michigan, Pennsylvania, Oregon, some of the most locked down states at the time where real estate was not considered essential. No MLS that I'm aware of in the United States went to zero. No new listings, no new sales, no new pendings. Real estate was still happening. Real estate will continue to happen because there's never going to be a bad time to buy good real estate. People will always buy and sell real estate. The question is, are we going to work with the database? Are we going to choose to be resilient enough to continue getting up each and every day? What is mental toughness for you? Mental toughness for you could be simply going a month without a workout. You know, or without missing a workout. How many of you have done 75 hard? That's you. I drank a couple gallons of water like 3 days in a row. I was like, all right. Wow. If you've done 75 hard, you know it's a discipline conversation. It's about continuing the trajectory and seeing what discipline level you need to start and ultimately to finish. I decided to, you know, one of my business partners, Ben Kenny, I've mentioned him before, I've probably mentioned him several times today. He said, when you pick your goal, you pick your pain. So whenever you choose a goal, there's going to be some measure of discomfort because when you set a goal, it ultimately tells you what you don't have or where you're not. Very few people ever set a goal unless they're considered average or they want to do less than on goals that they've already achieved, already accomplished, things that they know they can do or things that have relatively become easy for them. We set goals to push us, to challenge us. I turned 48 this year. When I was 47, I decided I'm going to become a marathon runner. In that process, the longest I'd ever ran was 4.25 miles. And I'm going to start to be a marathon runner. That was a whole new level of pain. I learned a lot about resilience in the process. What you learn is you get to decide what mental toughness is for you. It's how do you push yourself to keep going on your toughest day. It could be delivering your work ahead of schedule 2 days in a row. It could be calling a friend to catch up every Saturday. It might be calling 5 people in your database and saying, how are you? Just call and check on things. Whatever is uncomfortable for you is your resilience factor and something that you can push yourself towards that's going to stretch you and allow you to grow. Whatever it is, be clear about what you're going after. Pick your own pain, your own discomfort. And when you set that goal, make the decision no matter what, you're going to keep going. The thing that I love about being an entrepreneur versus any business or any job that I've ever had in my life, I've done a lot of different jobs prior to becoming a real estate professional. Prior to becoming a real estate agent, I had about every job you could. Some of them I was also very similar to school. I was asked not to return the next day. I think being an entrepreneur was what I was meant to do because the only person that could fire me was me. And I chose not to do that. So what I love most about this business is the only way you fail is to quit. You realize that? The only way you fail in industry as an entrepreneur today is quit. And there's a lot of evidence that says, here's why you should look at all the data. You get to choose every single day you wake up and you do this again. Building grit with small wins. So often we think about grit as like extreme situations. I'm going to go from the couch and I'm going to jump up and run a marathon. I promise that was not my approach. It took weeks, it took months, it took a lot of time to build from the longest distance, 4 miles, to ultimately completing 26.2. I did it twice last year. I'm running 4 this year alone, so I get to come back to New York City in November. That was one of the most difficult experiences of my life. Thank you. And it was so grueling that I decided, all right, New York, you beat probably a lot of people over your ears. I didn't feel like I won, so I'm going to come back and give it another shot. But that's what mental toughness is. It's like a muscle. It needs to be worked. It needs to be flexed. And we have been, frankly, in this profession, we have been on a really push ride. It's been easy. If you think this has been hard, I really want to push you and impress upon you that hard is just beginning. But you're the only one that gets to decide if you're going to continue, if you're going to push. And I promise there are going to be days where you're going to feel like giving up. So what do you do when you feel like giving up? Number one, don't. That's not on the slideshow. That's just like your mind is a suggestion engine. I recently read a book. I can't get enough of it. I'd never heard of this lady before. It's called The Mountain Is You: How to End Self-Sabotage. And the author really spoke to mental toughness and resilience. And one of the things she said is that the mind is a search engine. It's also a suggestion engine. It's always making suggestions for you, to do something. Hey, you should do this. Hey, you should not do that. That our mind is constantly just a rolling, evolving, like hamster wheel of suggestions. This is painful. It's suggesting if you're tired, you should quit. It suggests you give up. It suggests you take an easier path. Maybe this isn't for you. Maybe you shouldn't do this. Hey, this hurts. You should stop. The mind is also always looking for what's missing, which is why for so many people, they get to the place and they're like, I wanted this goal. Why aren't I happy? I worked my tail off to accomplish all of these things. Where's the joy? Where's the ring? Where's the watch? Well, your brain isn't designed to make you happy. Your brain is designed to keep you alive. And what it ends up doing is continues to look for what's missing, what's wrong. How many of you have ever had everything you possibly could want at that moment in time and still couldn't find, like there was still more? What's next? So many high achievers do that. They'll achieve their next thing and the next thing and the next thing and the next thing. And they say, all right, great, hit that milestone. Now what's next? Because that's the way the brain operates. So how do you build mental resilience? You first acknowledge all transformation starts with awareness. You first acknowledge what's actually happening. You realize that discomfort is temporary. Relative to the time in your normal day, think about things that you've done, habits you performed, workouts that were finished in an hour or two. Life is easier now than it's ever been. I mean, 300 years ago, we had to build our house. We had to kill our food. Today, we complain if we forgot our iPhone charger at home. Anybody besides me like that? You'll never regret good work once it's done. How do you build resilience? Well, it starts with what you focus on. Because what you focus on is what you're going to end up feeling. Whatever you focus on is what we feel. You can write that down. Focus equals feeling. Number two is what you make it mean. We are meaning creators. That's why you have two people. One loves to call their database, loves to work with their clientele, loves to create opportunities, loves to stay in relationships, and one that doesn't want to call anyone once I have helped them in the past. Why? Because I don't want to bug them. How can you have two people in the same task and one says, well, calling people means I'm bugging them, I'm bothering them, I'm harassing them. I don't like when other people call me. I don't want to be that pushy salesperson. And another one says, call my database all the time. They love to be touched. They love to have relationships. They love to have conversations. It's the same thing, and two people make it mean something totally different. And the meaning that you create will determine what you ultimately do and the choices that you make. One of the tricks to start doing this and build mental toughness and resilience is, first and foremost, see things as they are. There's a caveat, not worse than they are. We do this all the time. I think our profession is probably the most guilty. What do I mean by that? See things as they are, not worse than they are. I have never met any of you today that I've ever physically seen put out a fire. That's the language I hear all the time. What'd you do today? I was putting out fires. And all these fires put out. I'm like, you guys must go through fire extinguishers like crazy. I've never physically witnessed a real estate agent putting out a fire. I've never witnessed a human being drowning in paperwork. It's like, did the industrial size shredder blow up at shred day? And you're like, nah. You're taking on shredding paper in your life. It's horrible. Call 911. I've never seen that, but that's how we describe our situation and our experience. We tend to increase the significance by sounding worse than it really is. So become consciously aware and listen to each other, listen to your friends, listen to your family, and point out what's really happening. Describe the situation that's actually happening. The real estate industry is a challenge because there's less money that are in it today. So you have to outwork your competition. You have to make one more call. You have to decide to be resilient, get up a little bit earlier, go a little bit later, and work a little bit more challenged or a little bit harder in between. And each and every one of us can do this. So we have to see the situation for what it is, not worse than it is. Number two is, how do you want things to be moving forward? What's your goal? What's your trajectory? What are your outcomes? What's your desired outcome? And then number three, make it the way you want it by making the choice every single day to move it that direction. This is where we see things today. Everybody's standing in line hungry to win. Very few people stand in line hungry to do what winning requires. You can see the line out the door, hungry to win. I'm gonna win, I'm gonna win, I got big goals. The guy sitting there probably sound asleep. You can't really see if his eyes are open or not. Hungry to do what winning requires. When I joined the military, I was like 145 pounds at the time. And I decided, I really wanted to bulk up. So I became a big fan of weightlifting. You can tell. Another thing about body types. I would be in the gym all day long, and all that would happen is I'd lose more weight. But I studied weightlifting, and I studied bodybuilding, and this was like one of my heroes at the time, a gentleman named Ronnie Coleman. Ronnie Coleman was the 8-time Mr. Olympian. He was unbeatable from 1998 to 2005. He was on the cover of every heavyweight magazine, every fitness magazine, Muscle Fixer. He was the poster child for weightlifting at the time. His competitors said he was unbeatable for one reason. He was willing to do what they weren't. He would do things to his body that they were not willing to do. Dangerous things, unhealthy things, the weights that he would lift. Once somebody went to spot him, grabbed one of the weights, and it was so heavy, he dropped it on Ronnie's toe. That would terrify me because he's like 6'6", like 300 pounds. But he was willing to do things that other people weren't. This is Ronnie Coleman today. Still goes to the gym every single day. He had back surgery. He walks with a walker. What's amazing about it is he was unbeatable because of what he was willing to do when he was at his prime, when he was lifting. And you may look at that picture and say, well, wait a minute, I don't know about that. Really? That's what he got? Listen to what he says. Do you have any regrets? He said, if I had to do it all over again, yes, I have one regret. The day I squatted 800 pounds, I would do 4 reps instead of 2. Why? Because those 2 reps still haunt me today because I know I had 4 in me, but the coward in me only did 2. That's my only regret. So everybody's standing in line hungry to win. Few people are standing in line hungry to do what winning requires. Are you willing to do whatever it takes? That's winning. I've watched that video 100 times, and every time I do it, it hurts. And I always wonder one thing, and if I ever get an opportunity to interview him, the only thing I've ever wanted to know is what went through your mind after you made the decision to win. Because there had to be a moment that says, I won. Uh-oh. How far are you willing to push yourself to win? How much are you willing to do? It starts with this word, responsibility. I hear the word accountability so frequent in real estate, and even more so in the coaching side of business. Accountability. I got to hold people accountable. I need to be more accountable. I need to hold myself accountable. And accountability, you cannot have accountability without first taking responsibility. It's one of the issues that we have in government today is you hear an entire group of people say, we need to hold them accountable. You have to first have people that take responsibility in order to ever hold somebody accountable. Where is your own ownership in your business, in your goals, in your outcome, in what you're looking to achieve? See, I learned this the hard way. I grew up as the ultimate, call it victim behavior. A victim does three things really, really well. They complain, they blame, and they justify. I blamed everyone pretty much my entire youth, my entire adult life. It was the teacher's fault, it was the school's fault, it was the superintendent's fault, it was people I've never even met's fault. It was not my fault that this wasn't working out. It wasn't the fact, it wasn't my fault that I wrecked my car. It was the car that cut me off. It's fault. Can you see how growing up blaming everyone else, you're probably not going to get very far in life? Yeah, I learned that the hard way. So as I got my real estate license and I started what I would consider going to be a great business, a great opportunity, I ran into a wall. My behavior and my way of thinking hadn't changed. A friend of mine that I was in the Navy with one day sent me this book. Now, it sounds cliche to read something and say, that book changed my life. This book actually did. It changed the trajectory of my life. If you've ever read it, then you probably know what I'm talking about. If you haven't, it is a classic. It's called The Traveler's Gift by Andy Andrews. And there was a statement I read, and I remember exactly where I was. I was failing. I was in a cast. I was broke. I remember I was going to and from the office. I could drive again at that time. I had a sling on. And I was driving to the office, and the bank called me and said, Mr. Lee, you haven't made a payment on your car. I said, yeah, I'm very aware of this. And he said, well, maybe if you spent a little less money. I said, okay, there is no money to spend. Like, I have nothing. Well, maybe you could make a payment. I was like, you don't understand what broke means. I'm talking broke. So I ended up getting a part-time job. I waited tables at night. Waited tables at Chili's. That was my line. That was my script. Welcome to Chili's. Can I take your order? What can I get you to drink? So I worked in the real estate office. I worked at Chili's at night. And I learned from this that the buck stops here. The statement that I remember, because I rolled over, if I remember correctly, I had a hangover. Like I said, I didn't make very good decisions at that moment in time. And I was using this book, because it had been sent to me a few years prior to that. I was using it as a coaster. You still had water rings on it. And I grabbed it, and I was laying in bed, and I was like, I wasn't going to the office. I had no reason to. And that's the thing about being an entrepreneur. The hardest thing is, for so many of us, is we have to get up and go to work when there's no reason to get up and go to work. You feel me? So I read this, and I read a section that says the buck stops here. You are where you are today, mentally, spiritually, physically, financially, and emotionally, because of the decisions that you have made. And it went on to say, if you don't like where you are in life, your best thinking got you here. So wait a minute. I was like, I hate where I am in life at this moment in time. And this was a product of my best thinking. My best thinking got me here. I'm failing. I failed in relationships. I failed in the military. I have failed at school. I have pretty much failed across the board. I can't think of many more areas or opportunities to fail. And when he said, you know what, you've got to own everything. I recently was at a John Gordon event, the author of The Energy Bus, and he asked, what's the number one lesson that you've learned that's allowed you to get where you are today? I said, own your own shit. You got to own your own stuff. And the moment you take responsibility and you start owning everything that's ever happened to you, everything that you've ever done as a result of what's happening to you, life opens up in a whole new way. So I made the decision at that moment in time to find out who thinks better than me. Because my thinking wasn't working. I wasn't getting where I wanted to be. I needed a whole new level of thinking. So I sought out mentors. That was when I actually hired my very first coach. One of my first mentors was a guy, his name was Rick Irwin. Okay. Rick wore a suit and tie every single day. Rick had been in the real estate business probably for 25 years. He wore a tie every single day, and he hated ties. Couldn't stand them. He would cinch the tie up to the point where it's choking. And he would look in the mirror every single day, and he would say an affirmation before he went off to work. And just about he was choking himself up here, he'd look in the mirror and say, someone's going to pay for this. He was one of my very first mentors. And he went to the office every single morning with one decision. Someone is going to pay me today for wearing this. I'm going to make calls. I'm going to go door knock. I'm going to see people. I'm going to host open houses. I'm going to talk to them. I'm going to talk to someone until they have paid me to wear this thing today. My work ethic started changing. I was starting to be influenced by other people. I said, well, that worked for Rick. I will start doing that. I started wearing a tie, wearing a jacket. Started going to the office. I began making calls. I started role modeling and following other people. I had a coach that was very influential that started walking me through the process. One of the very first things this coach taught me in the word of responsibility is that every single thing that happens today is a cause and effect relationship. I see most of you have something to write down. When I ask, how many of you have a pen, pencil, paint, marker, something? Do me a favor, hold it up for a moment. Over something so it doesn't fall on the floor. On the count of three, I'm going to ask you to drop it. Ready? 1, 2, 3. What happened? I heard it roll. What else? It fell on the floor. What else? Made a noise. It moved. It landed. What now?
I said, did it move? Did not move.
It didn't move, so it just landed flat. Okay, what else? Gravity took hold. These are the most popular answers, by the way. You're getting them all right. You're doing great. What really happened? See, isn't that interesting? We trust the process. See, isn't that interesting? Oh, you had control. But what's interesting is when we talked about earlier, how do you build resilience and how do you own your own stuff and how do you take responsibility? You acknowledge, is the world happening to you or are you creating it? Most people describe a world as if it's happening to them. Most people did exactly what you do. I've done this experiment thousands of times, and in all those times, very rarely have I ever had someone say the first time, I dropped it. I let it go. I've had people say, well, I let it go, you made me. But are you describing the world like it's happening to you, or are you taking ownership of everything that's occurring? See, we let the pen go. It didn't fall. It didn't drop. It didn't make a noise. That was the effect that happens. And whenever you're at effect, you're powerless to change anything about it. You can choose what you do with your skill set, learning the economy, learning the marketplace, learning values, learning prices, learning inventory, learning scripts and dialogue, learning the hard skills of what to say, learning the soft skills, how to say them. You have a choice in what you do with your skill set. If you describe the world as if it's happening to you, then you'll be powerless to change anything about it. When I learned that lesson from my very first coach, it immediately made an impact. I started following even more people that were successful. I learned this thing called the science of success. Like, wow, a lot of people who have achieved what I'm after did it very similar ways. So I started reading. So it was fascinating for me that now a guy that reads like 20 to 30 books a year was originally a high school dropout. I ended up going back to college. I had gone to junior college, because that's the only college dropout I can get into, by the way, if you ever wanted to know. I'd gone to junior college, got a couple college credits. I did some more while I was in the military, and eventually went back to college and I got my college degree in Bachelor of Science for human psychology. Because I figured as I was learning this, the thing that most fascinated me is how we think. Because I noticed I've had two very different lives. I've had a life of poor thinking surrounded by people who many of them unfortunately are no longer with us today because of the choices that they've made. And if I wanted to have a different experience of this thing we call life, I have to make different choices, better choices, and I have to stop being the only voice in my ear. Thus, that's exactly why I hired a coach. I hired a coach and I found mentors, so I stopped being the only voice in my ear. I noticed when I was the only voice in the room, I made really poor choices. I stood at effect far more than I stood at cause. So the cause and effect in life is this what it looks like. When you're at cause, you own everything. I learned three of the most empowering words are "it's my fault." Whether it is or whether it isn't, when I say the words "it's my fault," I have all of the power. The other people involved in the situation are rendered powerless because they get down, sure, yeah, it's all my fault. Because if I can own it, then I can do something about it. I can shift my experience of the moment. I can stand at cause. When you take ownership, you're at cause. When you pass ownership along, you blame, you complain, you justify, you're standing at effect. I didn't get the referral because I didn't ask for it. Or they didn't give it to me because my ISA can't convert. I can improve my skills, or they didn't listen to me. How many of you have ever said before, I'm guilty? I had a difficult client. Great, I'm in a room full of liars. No one's ever said they had a difficult client. That seller wouldn't difficult me. I had a crazy buyer. Some of you know what I'm talking about. Some of us have been the crazy buyer or seller. I do believe, on a side note, I do believe there's a human reaction that happens when you take a normal, sane human being that seems absolutely put together, and then you turn them and in, give them the label of a buyer or seller, something happens and their brain loses. It like their brain melts out of their ears and they become insane. I do believe that there's something to that. But as real estate professionals, we can't control other people. We can only control ourselves. As people, we can only control ourselves. What we learn, what we do, what we experience, what we own. So who are you giving your power to? And the last piece is the relationships. So it's resilience, it's responsibility, and then it's relationships. We are in a relationship business. And I cannot wait for me. I can honestly say, this business, I'm so blessed because of the relationships that I've gotten to meet over the years, and the mentors and the coaches that I've had, and the business partners and the people that I've met over the years. I was blessed when I became a real estate agent. I was with a small company. We eventually became part of a larger company. We eventually became part of a franchise. I was one day introduced to a lady, some of you may know, her name's Mo Anderson. Anybody know her?
Yeah.
Okay, several of you know her, great. I was introduced to Mo Anderson. Mo was an amazing lady, and she saw something in me. And really amazing, talented people, especially that have achieved a lot, they tend to see that in others. And one of the reasons she's still going to this day is because she's taking care of everything else that she needs and still delivering and helping other people. So she introduced me to this other person, this amazing lady named Diana Kokoska. And Diana introduced me to this program that we taught around the country for several years. And eventually because I was working on this type of environment, how can I get better speaking to people? How can I impart what I've learned and help somebody else? I don't know why I'm in this room today, but I do believe one of you or all of you came here for a specific reason. We were supposed to meet, and what I'm sharing is supposed to connect directly to you. And I don't know who that person is. But in the line of learning how to do this kind of work, I went to an event called Train the Trainer. How do you become a better presenter, in other words? And I met a gentleman named Ben Kinney. And those series of relationships to this day allowed me to be where I am today. During that trajectory, or during that time, I met this other amazing lady. I've had amazing women in my life. I can honestly say that. I met another amazing lady, you get to hear it later, named Debbie DeGroat. Debbie was my very first coach in the real estate business. I learned what work is like. I thought I worked until I met her. And I learned a whole new level of work. So relationships is the thing, both in my early years and in my later years, relationships is the common denominator of having what you consider the worst life imaginable to the best life imaginable. And those relationships have led me here today. I can tell you what got you here will not get you to your next destination. Once upon a time, there was a gentleman, and he was standing on an island. It was right by a river. He loved where he lived. It was a beautiful place. He had lived there his entire life. It was like paradise. And he noticed that the water every single day would rise. And he lived on an island, so there was only so much real estate to be had. And every single day, this river would rise a little bit more, a little bit more, a little bit more, a little bit more. When he realized that he had about 24 hours left before the water rose to the point that it would entirely cover the island, he made the decision. He started building a raft. He had never left this island. He was born on this island. He was raised on this island. He intended to die on this island, just not that way. So he built a raft. And by the time he got the raft built, he was ready to put it and see if it was seaworthy. The water was cresting over the shore. So he got on this raft and he paddled to the other side, a place that he'd never been to before. And as he got to the other side, he grabbed his raft. This is the thing that just saved his life. He took his raft and he started working his way onto the land. He encountered trees, brambles, bushes, basically a jungle. It was impassable unless he did one simple thing: let the raft go. Now, this raft had just saved his life. He just built it. He had just left where he had grown up. He just made the decision to leave. He just built a raft that had protected him. And now he had to abandon this very thing, this security blanket, for uncharted territory to continue to live. Are you willing to give up the way you've always done things, the relationships that you've had, the way you've worked relationships, the way you've worked business, the way you have done everything? Are you willing to give it up in order to get to your next best destination in life, in business, in health, in relationships? What say you? Say aye. All right, half of you are willing to do it. So we've got to rethink. They're no longer those words. They're now our forever clients. They're going to stay our forever clients. We're going to continue to work them as if they're our forever clients. We're in a musical chairs relationship in business today. In the real estate business, a buyer's market is like 8 chairs and only 5 people playing. A seller's market is like 5 chairs and 8 people playing. In 2021, it was more like 5 chairs and 800 people playing. You know what I'm talking about? Today's market is really interesting because today's market is, it's an audience of those watching the game vastly outnumber those playing the game. It's not like the $26 billion just evaporated. It's just sitting in equity, not on the table. It's like if you've ever played the game of Monopoly, you got hotels and you got houses, and they're sitting in the box. That's essentially what's happening with the real estate business today. So we have to be the ones, by taking responsibility, by choosing to be resilient and have grit, we're going to be the ones that continue to keep playing this game. If we had an easel, I would have just drawn this. 2 circles. I probably drew this, I'd say at least 200 times in 2020, especially between March and say June. Because almost every conversation I would have, we would start with this. I want you to draw 2 circles. Partners that I was coaching at the time got sick of hearing. It's like, I know what we're going to say. Yes, draw 2 circles. Because in any environment, they're the things that matter, and they're the things that I can control. And if I can't control it, then I shouldn't worry about it. And if it doesn't matter, and if it doesn't matter more importantly to me, to my family, to my goals, to where we're heading and what's important to us, then it's not something I should focus on. So where these 2 circles intersect, the things that matter, the things I can control, these are the things that are going to get my focus moving forward. And that's all I'm going to worry about. I'm not going to worry about anything else except these 2 things. When you're focusing on this, you'll find yourself wanting to do a few good things. Staying off social media, or doing social media less. Stop watching the news. You'll continue to put yourself in healthy environments where you're not scattered looking at all these things that are either can't control or don't necessarily matter. In relationships, the things that matter most is how often we communicate with them. It's like if you want to have a better relationship, communicate with people more often. Better yet, something I learned from Tony Robbins is, write this down, please. If you want your relationships to never end, do what you did in the beginning. If you want your relationships to never end, do what you did in the beginning. It's like dating. When you're dating someone, you're excited to see them. You might get them flowers. You take them on dates. You court. You do these things. Hopefully, with one day, you might walk down the aisle together. You do things in the beginning that so often we start neglecting over time. And in many cases, it leads to the dissolution of the relationship. Well, all relationships are the same. You want to have a better relationship with money, spend more time. You want to have a better relationship with people, spend more time with them. Spend more time showing how much other humans matter. If you have a database of 2,000 to 10,000 people, I don't care if you have a database of 500 people. I'm going to ask you today, if I had my finger over the delete button of your entire CRM, there is no rewind. There is no do-over. You can't have it back. You can't call tech support. You can't call Google. You can't call Privity. You do not get a do-over. I have your phone, and I'm about to slick it with a virus called the contact virus. You get to save 5 people. Who are they and why? Who would you save? Who can you think of? Not necessarily a specific person, but what would cause you to save a person in your database if this were true? Anyone? A raving fan. So you'd save a raving fan. How do you know if someone's a raving fan? They constantly refer you business. Great answer. How do you mind if I ask, how do you keep track of somebody that constantly refers you business? A general's list. Tell me about that.
In my database.
People that are VIPs in my database. How many of you have a list of those that refer you business annually? Not near enough hands go up. How many of you will have a list of everyone that refers you business annually? Say aye. Every year that list should grow. That's how you know you're maintaining a business that's growing and growing through the number of relationships that you have. So often what I find though, is it's a different set of people every year. This year I took great care of these people. I worked with these people over here. They refer me business. Next year I took care of these people and some of them referred me business. And these people now are referring me business. And then next year, 1 or 2 of these people over here, some of these people over here, but now all of these people over here. Think about what you need to change today and how you manage the relationship where everyone you work with sends you at least one piece of business annually. And you get to help some member of their family, some member of their friends, some member of their work, some partner or strategic partner that they have. You get to help someone else and expand the number of relationships you have today. I want you to ask yourself, who would be the first 5 that I would say to give me the best chance of rebuilding my business today? Write them down. Make a commitment today, please, that by the end of the day, you call every one of them. You say something as simple as, hey, just call and check in, see how things are, see if I can do anything for you. Do you need any help or assistance? Is there anything that I can offer you? This is what I believe is the problem, the real root of the issue with our profession today. Human beings no longer understand the lifetime of our service or our relationships. I want you to think about any profession today. Where do you get a lifetime of service for a one-time opportunity? So I see what real estate agents do. I've been doing this for 20 years now. This is my 20th year in the industry. It's all we do. It's all my wife and I do. She's a real estate agent. I'm a licensed real estate agent. We buy and sell our own houses. We coach professionals. This is all we do. I know what's going to happen. We're going to build this massive real estate empire, and my kids are going to wake up one day and be like, yeah, but I kind of want to play guitar. I don't really want to do that. I want to be an artist, play football or something. But in the process, relationships matter, but we're not raised that way anymore. We're not programmed that way. Today's modern society is you can't do anything for anybody without expecting a return, or they expect you to expect a return. I was walking around New York City with my family a few years ago, and a gentleman dropped his wallet. And I immediately grabbed it. At first, I thought how much cash was in. That didn't happen. But I caught up with the gentleman. I said, hey, you dropped the wallet. And he wanted to pay me. Like, he insisted. I'm like, no. This is just what humans are supposed to do to other humans. And we had this kind of like awkward, it was like, no, please, I'm good. I think more people should be like that. But we have such an expectation today that you pay for a service. We have Venmo, we have PayPal, we have Cash App. There are more and more apps to quickly transfer money from one person to the other. So we expect as a consumer, as a person in today's modern society to expect for everything you get right as you receive it. We have instant cash transfers today. I can pay you right now. It's like, all right, go ahead and stand in line. Let me just Venmo every single person. Then say, yeah, it's gonna call you. Just here you go, here you go. The consumer expects this today, and you wonder why they won't call you. The modern consumer is programmed that everything they get, they have to pay for. Everything is subscription-based, service-based. They get a bill, they get an automatic deduction out of their account. You don't even need to see bills anymore. And here we are as a real estate community providing a lifetime of value for often 1 or even 0 transactions that person's actually done with us. I mean, let's face it, if you know people and you're building a database, you'll invite them to a client experience, even if they've never been one, even if they've never referred you business. If they're a friend or a family member, you'll say, yeah, come on, let me take everyone to the movies. I'm doing an event, we're doing a wine and cheese. Hey, come to my open houses, I'm gonna give away gifts. Let me get you on a newsletter. Let me send you a market report or a listing alert. Let me tell you what's going on in the real estate industry as a whole. Let me tell you what the values are in your neighborhoods in real time. Let me do all of this for you forever. And we think they're going to call us when everything and everyone else is asking them instantly for money. Pay me now. What other profession besides real estate does this? Anybody thinking? What do you think? How many of you have other relationships that offer a lifetime service that doesn't come with an attached bill? See, I have relationships, I don't know about you, I have relationships that I pay every single month. My insurance agent does not call me and ask how things are going. He didn't ask, hey, can I see if I can offer you a lower rate? Do you know any family or members or friends that would like a lower rate? The only time I talk to my insurance agent is when I get a bill that says my insurance is going up for whatever reason. That's the only time I talk to him. My financial advisor only seems to call me when there's something new available as an opportunity or option, which usually involves cash transferring from my direction to his direction. We are the exception to the rule in modern day business that we offer value and service to consumers each and every day with no expectation, only a wish and a hope to get something in return to allow us to service their family and their friends. And we're the ones not making the calls. They're never going to call you. Matter of fact, write this down. It's not their job to call you. It will never be their job to call you. It's our responsibility and expectation to call them, because however awkward, how many of you besides me have ever felt awkward calling a client, someone you've done business with in the past, a family member, a friend, somebody in your neighborhood, an acquaintance, an ex-coworker, you felt awkward calling them and letting them know what's happening in the business today, right? It can feel awkward. And yet at the same time, I want you to take that and I want you to 10x it. What would they possibly call you for? Unless they had a real estate need. They understand how we get paid. Majority of people, if they've ever done a real estate transaction today, they understand this is a commission-based business. They understand how we get paid. How many of you have ever had some person say, oh, I didn't want to bug you. Like, I don't want to bother you. Because they know we're not getting paid for it. So we're the only ones that are going to cross that threshold and make it acceptable to become the connector and the person that they rely on for all of their community resources. They're never expecting to hear from you. We've got to rethink that and shift it. The 10% rule says that the number of relationships that you have today, 10% of them will move in the next 12 months. Which means on average, you should get a minimum of a 10% rate of return from the number of people that are currently in your database, especially the number of people that you know, the number of relationships that you have, that you would harness and work with. And just think of the people that you would invite to an event. If an event was going to cost you money, who are the people that you would invite? I'd say that gives you a real sign of what your database actually is and the number of relationships that you have that live in it at any given time. 10% rule. Beyond 10%, I've coached thousands of people and done 20,000 plus coaching calls. If you're at 10%, I beg you, let's keep going. Because there's a point in return where that perfection's the enemy of profitability. If you're getting more than a 10% rate of return on the database as a whole, great job. It may be time to look to the next source of business and how you can expand that. Or what could you do today to rapidly expand the number of relationships that you have and keep that 10% return? So just look at your database as a whole. Are you getting 10% more or less? If you're getting 10% rate of return, do me a favor, just raise your hand. That's opportunity. Anyone that's not getting a 10% rate of return has relationships, and here's what's happening. They're not calling you because they don't know that they can. They're never going to call you. And we know we lose more business from undercalling versus overcalling. So how many of you will make a commitment to start rebuilding relationships today and have those conversations? A couple of you are unsure. It can be awkward. It can be awkward, especially if we treat someone who just bought a house with us like we went on one date. We had an amazing experience. It was a great date. It was like, you swipe left or right. I've been married so long, I don't know which one does what. But you found that person. You went on an amazing date with them. You had a great experience. And then neither one of you call each other. 2 years later, you think about them and you pick up the phone to see how they're doing now. Yes, it can be a little uncomfortable. But just remember, it's 10 times more uncomfortable for them. The 3 questions that people in your database and your relationships are going to ask most frequently. The 3 things: can you help me? Can I trust you? And do you care about me? And we don't do this through what we say. We demonstrate this through our actions. How do you show someone that they matter, that you can help them, they can trust you, and you care about them? Here's the fun part. They trust you immediately. How do I know this? How many of you in this room have ever been asked to present your real estate license in front of a consumer? One person. There's usually like one. But in all the years, in 20 years, I have never been asked, may I see your real estate license? No. They invite you into their home with a business card that anybody can have made online, printed out on their own paper, cut out, handed out. Here's my business card. See, it's got my picture. It says real estate agent. And in an hour and a half, or an hour, or in some cases 45 minutes, or in 15 minutes, if they're really convinced that they're ready to go, they hand you the keys to their home. They're already a yes when you arrived. They already trust you, and they have no reason to. You told them you're a real estate agent, and they said, sure, go ahead. Here are my keys. I'm going to put this thing called a lockbox in your door. All right, great. Hey, there's a dog out back. Take care of him too. But then we go through these motions. So they already trust you. They believe you can help them. The real question is, how do you demonstrate that you care about them? It's through the touches, it's through the conversation. So this is my friend Ben. This is one of the most easiest scripts dialogues that you can work with today.
Hi, this is Ben Kinney. And I want to give you some tools that you can use to generate referrals from your sphere. If you're anything like me, what you think about is, I don't want to bother my friends and family. And what I want to tell you, number one, is by not talking to your friends and family, you could allow them to work with somebody that doesn't care about them as much as you do. So how do you do that and not feel a little bit slimy? I want to give you one of my favorite scripts. It's called Real Estate Plans. Hey, Dave, this has been Kenny. I wanted to give you a call and ask you a quick question. What are your real estate related plans for the year? The script is as simple as that. But if you want to spice it up a little bit and you feel like you want to have a reason for asking that, here's what I want you to do. I want you to tie it to your next vacation. Hey, Dave, this has been Kenny. I wanted to give you a call and ask you a quick question. My family and I, we've been thinking about taking a vacation this year. But before I did that, I wanted to make sure that I talked to each one of the people that are in my sphere and ask them, what are their real estate related plans for the year so that I can schedule my vacation when you guys don't need me the most. So since I have you on the phone, let me ask you the question. What are your real estate related plans for the year? Use this script and I promise it'll work and you'll get referrals. Thanks again.
I used to make a mistake of sharing that, and then people say, can you send me that script? So feel free to take a picture of it. How difficult was that? More importantly, how easy would that be to say, do you have any real estate related plans? I think the easiest call for us to make, though, is any time of challenge. They're called care calls. Anytime there's bad weather, there are issues, there's economic strife. You know, they say there was I don't remember what the estimate was. It was an absurd number of the number of people that took forbearance in the early 2000s or 2020. And when they made it forbearance a thing, they said, hey, take forbearance. You don't have to pay your mortgage payment. And many people took forbearance before they even knew what forbearance was. And many people today are now struggling because the thing about forbearance, they didn't tell anyone. You know what it is? You got to pay it back, or we'll roll it in. Or here's what happened to a very dear friend of mine. I actually ended up buying her house, and now she's staying there as a tenant until she can buy it back. She's a lifelong friend. She's known my parents for years, and she took forbearance. And when she did that, they didn't tell her, by the way, you're not going to be able to refi. It's not going to affect your credit score, but just no one's going to give you a loan to be able to refi, because it will affect your ability to get a loan. So nobody told people this. So these care calls and opportunities, and when things and challenges happen, you pick up the phone and just say, hey, how's it going? Do you have any real estate related questions? Anything I could help with? I mean, imagine if you went to see your physician and your physician was nervous about asking you why you're here, or what brought you in today, or how you feeling? I'd be afraid to go to see a physician if they were uncomfortable asking me how I felt. This is our profession. We're the real estate agent. We're the ones that get to help them. And so long as they own a home, I'm going to ask that you take personal responsibility for everything that happens from the moment they bought it to the moment they sell it, and everywhere in between. The main difference between someone succeeding and someone who is failing is the number of positive relationships they have in their life. Amen to that. If you don't evolve, you don't find ways and new ways to challenge yourself, challenge the way you do business, you're going to wake up one day in a BlackBerry in a world full of iPhones. Everyone else is improving, and you're still running the same old tired software. So how big would your business be today if you had never lost a customer? If you still had every customer who had ever used you, regardless if they stayed local or not? Name a business that could survive a year without referrals or repeat business. Think about what lessons we learned from 2022 in this hyper acceleration and go, 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 about the number of relationships we need to thrive in business today. And more importantly, moving forward, how would you run your business today if 100% of it had to specifically be from referrals and repeat? If there were no more online leads, no more advertising, no more marketing, no more open houses, if you had to build your business moving forward just by relationships, what would you change today? So this is a staggering statistic to me. Since 1955, only 52 of the Fortune 500 companies remain in business today. That's 10.4% because they kept their customers. That's the only reason they kept their customers. Innovation doesn't have to look disruptive. Innovation can simply be doing something you've never done before. That's innovation for you, or your business, or your industry. It's simply elevating the level of customer experience that somebody has working with you. See, to me, this is a fascinating person. Angie Hicks. Anyone know about Angie Hicks? She's an amazing lady because she's a lady that started doing something revolutionary. She did something that none of us could possibly do. She door knocked. She started her career in Columbus, Ohio, door knocking. She went to work for a company that basically wanted to build a list of service providers. So she went door to door and asked, who is your lawn care maintenance person? Who is your plumber? Who is your electrician? Would you mind sharing me who does your drywall? Who is a painter? Who's your loan officer? Who's your title? All of the vendors and service providers that we have today, she started just asking people, hey, if you had a service and you were going to use something, who would you use? And she wrote this list down and she door knocked. And by the end of the first year, she had 1,000 people in this database of simple service providers. And then her company reached out to the service providers and said, hey, you've been highly recommended. Would you like to be on our list? If you'd like to be on our list, you can pay to be on our list. She eventually built this company to a place. They relocated from Columbus, Ohio to Indianapolis. They built a company so vast, so big of service providers, of consumer-based needs and products that she sold that company. Anybody know for how much? $500 million. It was nothing more than a database that she started going door to door. And one day it just dawned on me. She's doing the job we're supposed to do. See, the real estate agent, when we began this industry and this profession, long before the MLS, long before the internet, when you used to operate from a book, the real estate agent knew everyone in the community. They were the person you went to if you had a need. If you wanted to know who to use, if you want to know who not to use, if you wanted to know who was getting married, you want to know who to get divorced. The real estate agent knew because they knew everything about the community and the people that lived in that community.
You had your kitchen remodeled, made your driveway the envy of your neighborhood, reshingled the roof just in time for a meteor shower, treated yourself to the ultimate backyard upgrade, and removed a truly shocking amount of cat hair from your living room. All thanks to the top pros you found on Angie. Get started on your next home project at Angie.com or download the Angie mobile app today. Make your home an Angie home. Angie.
So the things that she shared is the ability to press through dark times. The things that continued and allowed her to move forward is she persevered, she stayed focused, she stayed optimistic, and she found ways to restate the same thing in different ways until it finally clicks for someone. That's what scripts and dialogue and objection handling really is. Today, this is where we tend to get our information. We get reviews from Amazon, from Google. Any of you use Nextdoor? See, my family and I recently moved, and I never used that app before. We recently moved from Oklahoma. We moved to Florida, relocated full time. I don't have a whole lot of relationships there. Like, we don't know a lot of people. We know very few. We know 2 neighbors, and I know my real estate agent. And I know my real estate agent doesn't call me. And I really like my real estate agent, but I find as a consumer, I have the same challenge that I assume other people do. I don't want to bug them because I know she doesn't get paid for helping me further. So I find myself on Nextdoor, and what I discovered is that the majority of people on Nextdoor and some of these apps are looking at recommendations and reviews by other strangers that they don't know, recommending products and services, doing the job that the real estate agent is ultimately supposed to do. So I wrote a dialogue around this. Please take a picture. It's another script and dialogue that says, hey, look, I'm going to paraphrase. Hey, look, basically, I haven't heard from you in a while, which to me means you must be going online and looking for service providers elsewhere, or I bought you, or I sold you the perfect house, which I've never seen before. And since you haven't called me, I'm going to call you more frequently so you don't go online, you don't end up with somebody that I haven't vetted, I don't know. So feel free, please call me with anything and everything you have associated with your home, the community, the network. I promise I either know somebody or I know someone who knows the person that you need. And I'm going to be calling you more frequently to check in until you feel comfortable enough calling me. We're going to skip this section. Yep. So when you got your real estate license, okay, I'm going to assume you were like me, you were excited. You had a vision for where you were headed. You were excited about the future. You had a trajectory. It was for you day one. It was your day one in business. Well, like we said, when you first walked in the door, you can choose to take a red pill or the blue pill. You can choose to walk out with the same information, running your business the same exact way you always have, or you can choose to do business differently, think differently, operate differently, involve different people in your ear. So the things between the left and the right ear aren't the only things you're relying on. You can choose for it to be day one all over again, each and every day in your business. This is an Amazon philosophy, by the way. What's day two?
Okay, I think this one is a very important question. What does day two look like? What does day two look like? I know the answer to this. Day two is stasis, followed by irrelevance, followed by excruciating, painful decline, followed by death. And that is why it is always day one.
Maybe you shop at Amazon. Everyone in the room, right? I track this in a year's time frame. We talk about overcalling or undercalling. The number. I literally did this one night. I went through my emails and I realized that, not counting phone calls or anything else, Amazon had emailed me 1,348 times in the course of the year. Don't judge how much we shop. But think about the number of times that Amazon reaches out to you. How many of you have ever been offended by that? They ask, hey, did you get the service? It's delivered. It's been ordered. Would you like this? They make recommendations. They make suggestions. Hey, other people that bought this item, you might like that item too. 1,348 times, never once have I been offended. We're so worried that we touch people 33 or 40 times a year with a couple phone calls that they might actually reject us in some way. Because we're not operating like it's day one. We don't do day one. We may not end up having a day two. There's a reason for it. There's a scientific reason that people don't remember you. It's called Miller's Law. It's very, very important. This is why I want to end on this. Miller's Law means the human mind doesn't